Good morning, class. So in the previous video we learned about the Gupta administration. The salient features being that the king, it was a monarchy, and the king was the sole authority over all matters related to administration, military, finance, and grants which were given in the form of lands. Though there was a council of ministers, but all matters related to the state or the kingdom were referred to the king. Then we learned about the feudatories over here, the Kumar Matya and the Sandhi Vigrahika. Now today we are going to learn about the provincial and local administration under the Gupta rulers. The Gupta rulers developed the first systematic provincial and local administration, which was primarily concerned with the collection of revenues and maintenance of law and order. All these were internal matters. Provincial administration. The core of the empire directly controlled by the Guptas was divided into bhuktis. Please underline, each of which was placed under the charge of an uparika. Underline that. The uparika was a governor appointed by the king. Underline that too. The bhuktis were divided into vishyas, placed under the charge of vishyapati. The vishya was divided into smaller units. This pattern, however, was present mainly in the territories directly governed by the Gupta kings, but not where a treaty had been signed by the Gupta kings along with other rulers who had been defeated by them, and they were left to rule over their own kingdom in their own best way possible. So please underline all that. Elsewhere there existed different fiscal and administrative units such as Desh, Mandla, Bhog, etc., especially in central and western India. Fiscal is something to do with financial matters. Now coming to village administration. The village administration was managed by the village headmen, the way we call them the Gram Pradhan these days, or the Sarpanch. The Gupta inscriptions refer to the participation of leading local elements in the administration of the village or small towns called Vitthis. So all the elderly people who had knowledge about something or the other, or who were wise, they formed the council which was headed by the village headman. No land transactions could be effected without their consent, and this may have been also true of other important affairs. So in the inscriptions we do get to know that no transaction of land was possible without the consent of the the village headman and the other local leaders, prominent local leaders. So if it is true, stands true for land transaction, then the other issues dealing with the villagers also were referred to them, and their authority was final. Now, thus, while villages in modern times were managed from above, those in the Gupta times seem to have managed from the grassroots level. It was the Guptas believed that the local people had local problems, so they were best dealt by local people themselves, the elders amongst themselves. Now coming to town administration. There were various towns, janpads, which issued their seals and coins. They were administered by a committee of 5, so it was a council. Some towns were being administered by some kind of parishads. Parishads are councils. The towns in the Gupta Empire were usually placed under an officer called Purpal. The leading local men were also associated with the work of administration in town. So, leading local men, people who were Brahmins, then leading businessmen, such people were part of the council. Such people belonged to the guilds. What are guilds? Groups of artisans and traders which flourished during the Gupta age. Vaishali in Bihar was an important town where there were separate guilds of artisans, Kulika, and of merchants Shreshti. Please underline that. Whatever you see underline, and whatever I am telling you to, you have to keep on underlining. So if we look at the flow chart, then it will be kings, and then under them Bhuktis, or the governor of Uparika, then Vishyas, or governors of Vishyapati, and then there were smaller units. When we are talking about the village administration and the town administration. Now this feudal nature of polity we will not do. Now we will come to page number 63, the golden age of Indian culture. The Gupta period is described as the golden age of Indian culture because of the high level of civilization and culture of this period. So the administration was very good, therefore the civilization and culture was also up to the standard. Along with the revival of Hinduism, the power of creativity was unleashed in the fields of education, literature, arts, architect, science, and at the same time extending this influence beyond India's frontiers. Frontiers are the borders. So they excelled during the Gupta period. The kingdom excelled, or the subjects or the people excelled in all aspects of life. Now coming to education. During the Gupta age, education was given utmost importance. This is evident from the intellectual output in various fields like literature, science, mathematics, astronomy, astrology, and medicine. So in all these fields, people were giving lot of inputs and they were progressing. Now there were many centers of learning in cities like Patliputra, Vallabhi, Ujjain, Ayodhya, and Nasik. According to the inscriptions, the teachers were learned Brahmins who were known as Acharyas and Upadhyayas, and sometimes they were also given the title of Bhatts. These teachers were supported by the grant of villages. Grant is the financial support, called the Agraharas, given by the Gupta rulers, and charities given by generous public. The disciples called Shishyas had to learn 14 sections of science, that is the Chaturdas Vidya, comprising the 4 Veds, 6 Vedantas, the Puran, the Mimamsa, the Nyaya and Dharma, besides Vyakran, Ashtadhyayi of Panini, and the Satsahashri Samhita or the Mahabharata. So this is very important. A student who was enrolled under one of the Acharyas or the Upadhyas it was mandatory for them to learn all these things. Now, in the Gupta period, the Jain and Buddhist systems of education assumed a different dimension. They progressed to altogether a new level. Buddhist monasteries admitted students for 10 years. Learning began with the oral method. Later, they shifted to the reading of literary texts. The monasteries had libraries. Important manuscripts were copied and stored. Students from other countries like China and Southeast Asia came to the Buddhist monasteries for education. So underline this. The monasteries were normally maintained by grants from kings and the rich mercantile class. People who believed in Jainism and Buddhism, or even the kings, whether they believed in Jainism or Buddhism, they were followers of these two sects or not, but they did provide grants to them. They attracted scholars from far and near. Fahin also spent several years in the monastery at Patliputra studying Buddhist religious books. So please underline that. Now higher education was given equal importance during the Gupta age, as is evident from a number of universities which existed during this period. Underline the 2 popular universities were Takshila and Nalanda. The Takshila University was one of the first few centers in the world which offered higher education. This university was, however, established before the Gupta Empire came into existence. So Takshila University's history goes beyond before the Gupta Empire came into existence. Then we have the Nalanda University. Please keep on underlining whatever you see underlined. It was the most renowned educational institution of ancient India. It was located at Nalanda in Rajgriha in Bihar. A lot of information about the Nalanda University is given in the inscriptions and in the accounts of Yun Sang, a Chinese Buddhist scholar and who visited India during the reign of Harshvardhan. The University of Nalanda had imposing buildings, huge, impressive buildings. There were at least 8 colleges built by different patrons, including one by Balaputradev, king of Sumatra. According to Yun Sang, the whole university area was enclosed by a brick wall. So the entire university was in a compound. The Nalanda University provided various facilities to the students for their studies. There were 3 great libraries called Ratna Sagar, Ratna Dadhi and Ratna Ranjak. There were more than 10,000 students and teachers. They came from Korea, Mongolia, Japan, China, Tibet, Ceylon and various parts of India. So please, all this is very important, Nalanda and whatever we learnt about Takshila University over here. Coming to page 64, continuing with Nalanda University. The subjects of study at Nalanda University were all the 4 Veds, logic, grammar, medicine, Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya and the Buddhist. Sankhya is mathematics. And the Buddhist works of the different schools. Remember, when we were doing Buddhism and Jainism, we learnt about the different schools of Buddhism. Nalanda University was not an ordinary university. Now, one more thing, though it is a Buddhist university, but they were teaching about the Veds. Nalanda University was not an ordinary university. It was a postgraduate institution to which admission was very difficult. Before admission, an examination. Which examination? An entrance examination was held in which hardly 20% students passed and the rest were rejected. Only the highest and the brilliant minds were admitted to the Nalanda University. Nalanda continued to be a beacon of light up to 12th century AD when it was destroyed by Muhammad bin Bakhtiar Khilji, a general of Muhammad Ghori. Today, only the remains of its magnificence and glory can be seen. So, it did an impressive work where science, grammar, medicine, Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya and other works are concerned. Now, science, culture and literature we will take up in the next video. Please make sure that you learn each and everything about Nalanda University, the subjects taught over there, then the names of the 3 libraries over here, then do remember about Yun Sang, then the students came from where, all this information is very important, children. Provincial administration, you have to learn village and town administration. Who was the head and were there any council of people or elders who helped the headman or the minister in dealing with day-to-day issues of the life of the people. Till that time, stay safe and stay blessed. Thank you.